When my own son forged my signature and tried to sell the house I built my life in, I didn't cry. I just stared at the papers, my name written in his handwriting, and felt something inside me snap so quietly it almost sounded like peace. People think betrayal comes with shouting or tears, but mine came wrapped in silence, in a lawyer's envelope, sealed with my son's ambition. My name is Sarah Miller, and the day he tried to sell my home was the day he learned who really owned his world. The phone rang just as the sun slipped through the lace curtains, spilling that strange golden light Charleston wears in late autumn, the kind that makes everything look peaceful, even when it isn't. "Mrs. Miller?" a polite male voice said. "This is Rick from Atlantic Realty. I'm just calling to confirm you've agreed to sell the house to our client." I froze. "Sell what house?" "The one on Riverside Drive," he replied. "Your son, Mr. Ethan Miller, signed the paperwork and said he had your authorization." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The room went quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. I turned my head toward the mantel where Thomas's photo sat in its wooden frame, smiling the same way he did the day we moved in. Behind it, the wall still carried pencil marks from years ago, Ethan's height, each line a memory carved into the wood. And now, my own son was selling every piece of it like it meant nothing. I grabbed my phone and called him, straight to voicemail, called again, still nothing. The tea went cold beside me as I sat staring at the phone that would not ring back. Within the hour, I was in my car, driving toward the address on the business card Rick had given me. The office smelled of fresh paint and new money, two things that never last long. A young receptionist handed me the file with a rehearsed smile. "Here it is, ma'am. We just need your confirmation on this signature." There it was. My name, written in my own handwriting, except it wasn't mine. I'd signed thousands of documents in my lifetime, balancing ledgers and contracts. But this was a stranger pretending to be me. "Who sent this to you?" I asked quietly. "Your son," she said, still smiling. "He mentioned you were moving into the senior residence in Mount Pleasant. He said he just wanted to help with the transition." I felt my heart drop, but not from anger. It was something colder, like standing in the middle of winter with no coat on. When I got home that night, the wind off the Ashley River rattled the windows. I stood by the glass, the reflection of the streetlights trembling on the water below. My voice came out in a whisper, but it filled the whole room. "My son just tried to sell my house." Later, I opened the file again, my hand steadier this time. There it was, his forged signature beside mine, and tucked inside, a set of banking documents marked temporary mortgage registration. For a long time, I just stared at them. Then I folded the papers neatly, slid them into a drawer, and locked it. I wasn't crying anymore. Something inside me had gone still, like calm before a storm. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the sound of that man's voice replayed in my head, polite and professional, asking about a sale that was never mine to make. By dawn, I gave up trying to rest. I went to the old oak cabinet in the hallway and pulled out a worn box that still smelled faintly of cedar and ink, the one Thomas used to call our little vault. Inside were fragments of another life, faded receipts, mortgage slips, and a thin folder labeled in his handwriting, Helix Gate Technologies. I opened it carefully. That was the year everything changed. Thomas had been gone only 3 months when Ethan came home one night, eyes shining with ideas and ambition. He was 24, talking about startups, investors, and building something that would make Dad proud. We had nothing but the house, so I mortgaged it, our only security, to give him his beginning. Back then, I believed in him the way a mother believes the sun will rise. Now, in 2025, that same son appears on television wearing a tailored suit and a grin carved out of confidence. The anchor calls him the youngest CEO to lead a major tech company in the South. He smiles into the camera and says, "I built everything from the ground up. No one handed me anything." I laughed, quietly, bitterly. That ground was my home, and the hands that built it were mine and Thomas's. 3 days later, I drove to Atlanta for his new product launch. The auditorium glittered with money and noise. I sat in the back row, invisible, listening to applause that never once echoed my name. When the lights came up, I walked toward him. "Congratulations," I said softly. He barely looked at me. "You shouldn't have come. Mom, I'm busy." The word mom felt more like a formality than love. People hovered around him, shaking his hand as if touching success itself. One of his young assistants leaned toward me and whispered, "He said you're just a distant relative." I left before the next round of applause began. The drive back to Charleston was long and silent. Halfway home, I called Margaret. She didn't waste time. "Sarah, I just heard something. Ethan's trying to secure a bank loan using your house as collateral." My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "He's doing what?" "Vanessa told me, his new girlfriend. He's drowning in debt. Over $1 million. Maybe more." The highway lights blurred through the windshield. I kept driving, the hum of the tires masking the ache in my chest. "If he's setting fire to his own life," I murmured, "then I'll be the one to put it out. Not to save him, but to make sure he remembers who built the stove he's burning on." The next morning, I sat at the dining table where Thomas and I once balanced every bill and promise we ever made. Dust clung to the edges of the folders as I opened one envelope after another until a thicker document caught my eye, its header stamped Helix Gate Technologies, LLC. The founding agreement. 3 signatures sat neatly at the bottom: Thomas Miller, Sarah Miller, Ethan Miller. My breath caught as I read the details line by line. Under ownership distribution, it stated Sarah Miller, 27%, founding investment shareholder. I had never transferred that stock, never signed anything that gave it away, which meant I was still, by every letter of the law, a founding owner, not just a mother, a shareholder. By the time I reached Henry Crawford's law office, the afternoon sun had turned Charleston's sky to gold. Henry, old friend, old soul, looked up from his desk, startled to see me holding those papers. He read in silence, then removed his glasses slowly. "Sarah, if he never filed a transfer, those shares are still yours. Ethan's been running the company on your legal authority." I folded my hands, steadying them. His words echoed through me like a bell. Ethan once told me, "You don't understand business, Mom." No. He didn't understand that real business isn't built on profit. It's built on principles. As I stepped outside, the sun hit the folder in my hands, and a small, almost involuntary smile crossed my face. "He must have forgotten," I whispered. "Who wrote the first check that made him a man of business?" I asked Ethan to come home for dinner, not to argue, not to beg, just to see if there was still any trace of family left in his eyes. I cooked grilled salmon, the way Thomas liked it, with lemon and butter crisped over the skin. It used to be Ethan's favorite too. I set the table with the good plates, lit one candle in the center, and poured 2 glasses of white wine that caught the flicker of the flame. He arrived 15 minutes late, sharp suit, phone still in hand. Vanessa came with him, young, polished, her perfume so heavy it smothered the smell of dinner. "Dinner looks great, Mom," he said, sitting down with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Next time, give me a heads up. I only have half an hour." "It'll take less than that," I said quietly. "Just long enough for you to tell me why you're trying to sell the house." His hand paused on the wine glass. Then he set it down. Steady. "It doesn't make sense for you to live here anymore. Mom, the house doesn't serve a purpose. You'd be more comfortable somewhere with help, Selling it could finance the expansion for Helixgate. We're negotiating with a major partner. Vanessa's eyes darted between us. I thought you said the loan needed your mom's house as collateral. She stopped mid-sentence, realizing too late what she'd said. The air froze. I turned to him. What loan? Ethan? He smirked. Mom, you wouldn't understand. This is business. I smiled back. Small, calm, dangerous. Oh, I understand. I just never thought I'd raise a man who'd use his mother as collateral. Vanessa stood, fidgeting with her purse. Maybe we should... Ethan cut her off, voice sharp. You know what people say, Mom? They ask why my mother still lives in that old wooden house by the river. They think I'm failing because of it. You're holding me back. Something in me broke, but not the way he expected. For the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger wearing his face. Your father built this place with his hands, I said. If you're going to destroy it, at least make sure you're not standing on the same foundation while you do. He didn't answer. The candlelight caught the edge of his jaw as he turned away. When they left, the door slammed hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall. It sounded like something final, something that wouldn't be repaired. When the silence settled, I noticed a folder on the table. Inside was the mortgage agreement, Vanessa's handwriting in the corner, my name forged again. Only this time, it read, Sarah Ann Miller. One wrong name, one small mistake. And that was the moment I realized the house might still be mine to save. The next morning, I took that folder straight to Henry Crawford. He read every line, his eyes narrowing behind thick lenses. 2 mistakes, he said finally. The name's wrong, and he pledged corporate shares he doesn't own, both under your name. So legally? I asked. He looked up. If you wanted, you could sue him for fraud and financial misrepresentation. Both hold up in court. I sat quietly, listening to the old clock tick behind him. Dust floated in the sunlight, just like the day Thomas first brought me here. I don't want to destroy my son, Henry, I said. I just want him to understand I'm not something that can be sold. That evening, I tried calling Ethan. He didn't answer. I texted instead. If you're going to forge my name again, remember I spent 30 years reading contracts. He never replied. 2 days later, an email arrived from the bank. We're reviewing the legality of the mortgage documents. I knew Henry had already sent them the proof, but the final line of the message made my heart go cold. Mr. Ethan Miller has requested the loan be voided, stating that Mrs. N. Miller no longer holds any ownership in Helixgate Technologies. He hadn't just tried to sell my house. He was erasing me, wiping me off the company I helped build from the ground up. I shut the laptop and stared at my reflection in the black screen. He'd forgotten something. I always kept copies. I went to the bedroom, opened the small safe Thomas had installed years ago, and pulled out the original shareholder agreement. The seal still gleamed under the lamp, our signatures clear as the day we wrote them. For the first time in a long while, my hands didn't tremble. Well then, my dear son, I whispered, sliding the papers back into their folder. If you want to play with fire, I'll show you who built the furnace. 3 days after that dinner, the phone rang again. His voice was softer this time, polished with guilt that didn't sound real. Mom, I'm sorry for losing my temper the other night. I want to make things right. Come to the office tomorrow. I've arranged everything to pay you back. I don't want to owe you any more. I recognized that tone. It was the same one he used as a boy when he wanted extra money for something he didn't need. I agreed to meet him. Helixgate's tower gleamed under the Atlanta sun, all glass and arrogance. Inside, the air smelled of money and nerves. Ethan greeted me with that CEO smile, the kind that never touched his eyes. Mom, this will only take a minute, he said. Just sign this, and the investment you made years ago will be fully repaid. I want everything clean and official. I sat down and looked at the document. The first line read, "Waiver of ownership rights." I looked up. "Are you sure this is the repayment form?" He nodded without hesitation. "Yes, it's just a release. Makes things simpler for future expansion." I smiled faintly. "I understand." When he stepped out to take a call, I pulled a slim USB from my purse and plugged it into his laptop. Files opened instantly, emails between him and Vanessa. "Once Mom signs, we can sell Helixgate to Rydell Group and wipe the debt clean. That signature is our lifeline." I copied every file, evidence, proof, insurance. Then I slipped the USB back and folded the fake contract into my bag, leaving behind a photocopy I'd signed instead of the real document. Standing there in his glass office, I caught my reflection, an older woman, calm, unshakable, eyes sharp as steel. "My son sold his soul today," I whispered. "I'm just waiting for the receipt." That evening I called Henry. "I have what I need," I told him, "but I'm not ready to take him to court yet." "Sarah," he warned, "you're walking into dangerous ground." "I'm not walking," I said. "I'm teaching him the value of truth." He hesitated, then sighed. "The board's calling an emergency meeting next week. If the numbers don't add up, Ethan might lose his chair." "Good," I said. "Make sure there's a seat left for me." Before hanging up, I sent an anonymous envelope to the board's secretary. Inside it, a clean copy of my original shareholder agreement. Let the game begin. The morning of the meeting, I dressed in a gray suit, plain, precise, unshakable. Henry walked beside me, briefcase in hand, his silence steady as a drumbeat. Inside the boardroom, the air smelled of polished wood and power. 8 men sat around a table of glass so clear it reflected their doubt. Ethan stood at the head, voice smooth, confident. "Gentlemen, in order to maintain liquidity, I've decided to withdraw inactive shareholders, namely my mother, and proceed with a merger with Rydell Group." Polite nods circled the room. I waited for him to finish, then rose from my chair. "Gentlemen, you should know, my shares were never withdrawn. I am Sarah Miller, founding shareholder of Helixgate Technologies." Every head turned. Ethan's face tightened. "Mom, this isn't the place. You're making a scene." I placed my folder on the table. "No, Ethan, this is exactly the place. You wanted a transaction, now you'll get full disclosure." Henry opened the file and read aloud. "Articles of Incorporation, 2010, 27% ownership retained by Sarah Miller. No authorized transfer on record." Ethan gave a dry laugh. "You're just trying to embarrass me." I nodded at Henry. He pressed play on a recording. Ethan's voice filled the room. "Once Mom signs, we can sell the whole company." Silence. One of the senior board members stood, pale. "Ethan, are you saying you leveraged your mother's shares for the Rydell loan? That's federal fraud." Ethan's jaw clenched. I met his eyes and spoke evenly. "You once said I don't understand business. But before I was your mother, I was the chief accountant at Crawford and Langley. I understand everything." Henry handed over another file, an email Ethan sent to the bank, confirming, "My mother has signed. I take full responsibility." The words sealed his fate. No one spoke for a long time. Then the chairman cleared his throat. "Effective immediately, Mr. Ethan Miller is suspended from his role as CEO pending investigation. Mrs. Sarah Miller, as founding shareholder, is appointed interim executive authority." I gathered my papers. Ethan looked shattered, half anger, half disbelief. I leaned close enough for only him to hear. "You taught me something today. Never let anyone sign your name for you." When I left, the glass doors reflected a woman I barely recognized. Not the mother he betrayed, but the woman who took back everything he tried to erase. "You sold my house, Ethan," I murmured as the doors closed behind me. "But I just bought back your company with the truth as my currency." I never thought I'd step into a courtroom again after Thomas died. But that morning, I found myself sitting beneath the blinding white lights of the Charleston Federal Business Court, light so cold and unforgiving it felt like judgment itself. Across the room sat Ethan. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his once polished shoes dulled by days of denial. The confident CEO who used to command rooms with a smile was gone. In his place was a man cornered by his own reflection, trembling, tired, and stripped of every illusion of control. Henry stood beside me, calm as ever, his voice steady when he addressed the bench. "Your Honor, we have irrefutable evidence that Mrs. Sarah Miller is the founding shareholder of HelixGate Technologies, owning 27% of its shares that were never transferred, sold, or relinquished." He clicked the remote, and the projector illuminated the courtroom wall. The founding document appeared, my signature, Thomas's signature, and the official seal dated 2010. The ink was faded but undeniable. Then Henry played the recording. Ethan's voice filled the silence, casual and damning. "Once Mom signs, we can sell the company. She doesn't know what any of it means." The sound echoed through the chamber, sharp as a confession. You could hear the collective breath of the room tighten. The judge, an older man with eyes that had seen too many broken families over money, leaned forward and spoke with a deliberate calm. "According to federal corporate law, falsifying ownership and using another shareholder's property as collateral constitutes fraud. This court hereby rules Mrs. Sarah Miller is reinstated as a founding shareholder with interim control of HelixGate Technologies. Mr. Ethan Miller is suspended from all executive duties pending full investigation." The gavel struck once, loud, final, like the sound of a door closing forever. Ethan turned toward me. His voice was small, a boy's voice again, trembling through the ruin. "Mom, why would you do this?" I met his eyes, steady and cold. "Because you forgot that everything you built began with my hands. You only learned how to build, never how to honor what built you." For a moment, he looked like he wanted to speak again, but there was nothing left to say. Outside, the courthouse steps were swarming with reporters. Flashes burst like lightning as microphones thrust toward me. I didn't stop walking. I didn't need to. The headlines would write themselves before sundown. Mother wins corporate lawsuit against her own son. But the truth behind it was quieter. As I stepped into the sunlight, the breeze from the Ashley River brushed against my face. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like release, the kind that comes when you've carried something heavy for too long and finally decide to set it down. I looked up at the sky, bright and merciless, and whispered to no one in particular. "You tried to sell my house, Ethan, but you never realized that house built the company you just lost." The wind carried my words away, folding them into the sound of the city below. Somewhere, a church bell rang, solemn and slow, like it was marking the end of something sacred and the beginning of something painfully necessary. I walked toward the parking lot without looking back. The world could call it a victory if it wanted to, but for me, it was just a reckoning long overdue. The story spread faster than I could process it. Every network ran the same headline. Every anchor spoke my name with the same mix of awe and disbelief. On the evening news, I watched my own face beside the words, "Mother CEO takes over HelixGate." They called me resilient, fearless, a symbol of justice. But sitting alone in my living room, I didn't feel heroic. I just felt tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from work, but from watching something you love decay from the inside out. Ethan hadn't called, not once. The silence between us had become its own kind of verdict. The only person who reached out was Vanessa. Her voice trembled through the phone. "Mrs. Miller, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would go this far." "It's all right, dear," I said gently. "Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones we have to live through, not just learn from." A few days later, I met Henry at Helix Gates headquarters. The same glass tower that had once felt cold and sterile now seemed quieter, humbled. Through the window, I could see rows of people working, hundreds of them, unaware that the woman standing above them had just saved their jobs. Henry turned to me. "Sarah, you can do anything now. Sell it, keep it, or shut it down. It's yours again." I looked out at the city skyline, at the reflection of my husband's ring still on my finger, and shook my head. "I won't sell it. I'm turning it into a fund, one that helps people start over. People like Thomas once dreamed of helping." And so, Helix Gate Technologies became the Thomas Fund, a program for middle-aged entrepreneurs looking to rebuild what life had taken from them. It felt right. It felt like peace, disguised as purpose. When Henry offered to draw up my salary as acting director, I refused. "Justice isn't something you profit from, Henry. It's something you return, quietly, without expecting applause." He didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes soft behind his glasses, and for a moment, I saw the kind of respect that can't be spoken, only shared. Ethan came to the office one last time to collect his things. He didn't look up when I entered. His hands moved mechanically, boxing his plaques, his photos, his trophies, all the symbols of a victory that had slipped through his fingers. "You won," he muttered. "Happy now?" I stood there for a moment, watching the boy I'd once rocked to sleep in a house that still smelled of river air. "No, Ethan," I said quietly. "I didn't win. I just stopped you from losing yourself any further." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. The silence said more than any argument ever could. Before leaving, I placed a small envelope on his desk. Inside was an old photograph, the three of us standing in front of the house by the river, Thomas's arm draped over both our shoulders. On the back, in my handwriting, were just 10 words. "Don't let greed make you forget where you began." Then I walked out, letting the door close softly behind me. For the first time in years, the silence didn't ache. It simply, finally, felt like peace. A month later, I returned to Charleston. The house by the river still stood where we left it, the roof patched with old moss, the walls lined with cracks that time had drawn like wrinkles on a tired face. I hadn't fixed a thing. I didn't want to. Every scar on that house was part of its truth, just as every scar inside me was part of mine. When I opened the windows, the scent of salt and wet wood rushed in, mingling with the faint aroma of jasmine tea. The river was calm that morning, a ribbon of silver weaving through the mist. I brewed a cup and set it beside the folder that once held my shares in Helix Gate, now only a relic, not a claim. A folded newspaper sat nearby. The headline read, "Mother Wins Corporate Case." I watched as the wind from the Ashley River caught its edge, lifted it from the table, and carried it out the window. It fluttered briefly before landing on the water, the ink bleeding into ripples until both headline and paper dissolved into nothing. I looked toward the framed photograph of Thomas on the shelf, his familiar smile frozen in a moment that still lived somewhere inside me. I kept the house. Thomas, I whispered, but what I really kept was myself. That afternoon, I signed the final papers transferring ownership of the house to the Thomas Fund. It would now be known as the Founder's House, a place where those who'd lost everything could stay for a while, rebuild, and start again. The home that had once been a symbol of betrayal would now become a refuge for rebirth. When I opened the front door, the wind swept through the rooms, catching the curtains and filling them like sails. The late sun poured through the windows, casting a golden glow over Thomas's photograph. It looked almost alive in the light, as if he were standing there, proud, peaceful, waiting for the tide to turn. I stood in that light, breathing it in, feeling its warmth. There are things we can't save, I said softly. But if we have the courage not to seek revenge, only to make the world a little fairer than we found it, that's the truest kind of victory. Outside, the river kept moving, slow and endless, carrying everything broken and everything reborn out toward the sea.